Thank you.
Hey, Brandy, do you know if it's possible to hook up when you're doing Anchorage, Juneau, Fairbanks to also include Kenai Peninsula because they have capabilities there?
Sure, Regent Parker, if that's your preference, I can certainly look into that for you, yes.
Maybe potentially in the future.
Okay, I'll make that a note of that.
I know not today.
This is Brandy. Who else has joined us online?
Brandy, this is Mary.
Good afternoon, Regent Hughes. And someone else?
Brandy, this is Gloria.
Thank you, Regent O'Neill. I'm sorry, is that you, Regent Tuber? It's very hard to hear you.
Yes, it is. I'll be on mute. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Regent John Davies, and it's Monday, April 8th, a little past 1:30, and I'd like to call the special meeting of the Board of Regents to order. Randy, could you call the roll, please?
Regent Anderson?
Here.
Regent Banya?
Here.
Regent Beretta?
Here.
Regent Davies?
Here.
Regent Hargraves?
Here.
Regent Hughes?
Present.
Regent O'Neill?
Here.
Regent Parker?
Present.
Regent Purdue?
Here.
Regent Sweet?
Here.
Regent Tuber?
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, all right, thank you very much. So we have a full board here today, and we have several items on the agenda. Could we get a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
And moved and seconded. Roll call vote, please.
Regent Banya?
Yes.
Regent Tuber?
Yes.
Regent Hughes?
Yes.
Regent Sweet?
Yes.
Regent O'Neill?
Yes.
Regent Hargraves?
Yes.
Regent Beretta?
Yes.
Regent Purdue?
Yes.
Regent Anderson? Regent Anderson? Regent Parker?
Yes.
Regent Davies?
Yes.
10 in favor, none opposed.
Okay, thank you very much. So the next item on the agenda is the UAA Anchorage School of Education Expedited Program Review discussion and the motion to discontinue initial licensure programs at the UAA. Before we get started on that discussion, could we have that motion, please?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes?
this is Mary Hughes. I would move the motion that the president provided us on, I think, April 5th. And if someone there, it's so difficult to be online, but if someone there could read the motion, I would move it. And then if it is seconded, I would like to say a couple of things that are very short.
Okay. Brandy, could you read the motion as it's presented?
The Board of Regents approves the discontinuation of the following initial licensure programs at the University of Alaska Anchorage effective September 1st, 2019. Bachelor of Arts in Elementary Education, Post-Baccalaureate Elementary Education, Master of Arts in Teaching, Secondary Education, Bachelor of Arts Early Childhood Education, Post-Baccalaureate Early Childhood Education, Graduate Certificate Special Education Initial Licensure, Masters of Education, Early Childhood Special Education Initial Licensure. This motion is effective April 8th, 2019.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Regent Purdue seconds it. And Regent Hughes, you had requested the chance to make a couple quick comments.
Thank you. The emphasis is on quick. I move the president's recommended motion, and I move it with an extremely heavy heart. We let down, and we failed the students, and this motion allows us the only way we can provide the education that we promised our students when they enrolled at the University of Alaska. And they, as they demonstrated in February, not only have the burden of attempting to go to college and pay for it and work, but now they have the added burden because of what occurred, not only as a result of the CAPE review, but also of what the university did before and after the knowledge of the information came to the region. And I don't believe a student should have to go through anything like that. And I think that, a student, at least when I was a student, knew the path forward. And in doing what we possibly would do today, we'll give the students a path forward. And I'm hoping that all of the leadership of the university participates mightily in providing that path forward, because the students deserve what we promised them, and they deserve it as quickly as we can provide. And Mr. Chairman, I'm hearing a lot of echoing, and I don't know if it's just but people are moving papers, and I can hear all that. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, there is a little bit of an echo on the line, but we were able to understand the conversation clearly. Well, thank you. I share some of the concerns. I think that the focus has to be on what's best for the students, and I think it's a very difficult set of discussions and decisions that we're going to have to make. But I would also note that I believe that this is probably going to be the first of many, and so I hope that we can proceed on this, focusing on the issue at hand and come to a decision. So with that, I'd like President Johnson to fill out the motion that's on before us and lead us through the discussion and the thought process that you've been going through for the last couple months.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and members of the board, members of the faculty and staff and students who are joining us today. A day we'd rather be talking about other things, but as we were forced to, based on what we learned on January 11th, that UAA's School of Education and Initial Licensure Programs lost accreditation from CAPE, a requirement for Alaska Board of Education approval of our programs, and importantly, licensure for our students as teachers here in Alaska and elsewhere. This loss of accreditation is not only an organizational failure, it was a failure of our single most important promise or obligation to UAA's education students. And that promise is a certain path to licensure as a teacher through accredited and approved programs in Anchorage. Thanks to the relationships among our universities that have been fostered by and through our Alaska College of Education, we've been able to mitigate most of the negative impacts on our students. Our students graduating in spring and summer of 2019 are, thanks to Steve Atwater of the Alaska College of Education, Claudia Dibdahl, the interim director at UAA, Deed Commissioner Michael Johnson, and the State Board of Education. Our students are considered to have graduated from an accredited and approved program. So thanks to all of you for that work. In addition, with coordination from the Alaska College of Education and helpful support from UAA, UAF, and UAS stepped in to offer education students the choice to transfer to those universities' accredited and approved programs to be delivered to those students in Anchorage. Approximately 100 students have made the decision to transfer. Looking forward now, the question is how we will provide educator preparation programs in Anchorage such that our students have a certain path to licensure. We discussed the options with this board at your last meeting. After publicizing the options and after receiving input from students at a very well-attended town hall, from the public through many emails and direct testimony to the board, and from UAA student government, the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, the UAS Advisory Council, and members of the legislature. At your last meeting, you directed me to cause an expedited program review to be conducted of UAA's initial licensure and non-initial licensure programs. Chancellor Sandeen conducted that review, and Chancellors White and Caulfield contributed to the question of how each of their universities could fill in if the decision were made to discontinue UAA's programs. UAA's recommendation upon completion of its review to me was as follows. UAA recommended to discontinue its MAT program in secondary education and its special education certificate, but to continue its baccalaureate in early childhood education and its certification in that field, its baccalaureate in elementary education and its certificate in that field, and its Master of Education degree in early childhood special education. In addition, UAA recommended on its non-initial licensure program, its certificate in that field and its Master's in Education in Special Ed, and to continue its Master's in Education in Teaching and Learning, certificate in Speech Language Pathology, grad certificate in Language Ed, and its AAS in Early Childhood. Because our analysis of these non-initial licensure programs from UAF and UAS is not done, I would like to put on hold that discussion until next month and focus our consideration here just on the initial licensure programs, which include about 67% of UAA's education students. UAA has asked to be permitted to seek accreditation and state board approval of these initial licensure programs. And I appreciate very much Chancellor Sandeen's advocacy, to be expected from a strong leader, and her confidence in UAA's ability to secure both the needed State Board of Education approval for the 3-year period required for CAPE accreditation, and of course, CAPE accreditation. After evaluating UAA's request and the options proposed by UAF and UAS, in addition to input from Academic, Student, and Research Vice President Layer, General Counsel Hastina, I have recommended that we not continue those programs and that instead, UAF and UAS, with continued coordination from the Alaska College of Education, provide their programs to students in Anchorage. There are 5 key reasons for my recommendation. The first and most important, and in my view, sufficient on its own, is the lack of certainty UAA would be able to provide our students toward licensure from an accredited and approved program for up to 3 years. Given our experience, while I'm confident UAA has trained great teachers and that it has learned a huge lesson, painful though that is, I am not confident we can achieve State Board of Education approval because of its standard: substantial compliance with CAPE standards, 4 out of 5 of which UAA recently failed. Now, I'm pleased with the steps taken at UAA under the leadership of Interim Director Dibdahl and with support from the faculty at UAA. But without any expertise in CAPE standards, how will the State Board of Education have the confidence, with credibility of the kind that comes from CAPE itself, in our programs? This question cannot be answered with mere confidence or hope or belief. Another aspect of the uncertainty relates to time. 3 years. Would the Board of Education okay our programs for all 3 years, or 1 year at a time, or 1 semester at a time? And what if the board at some point says no? Is the university willing to take on that risk to students and to us as an academic institution when it has 2 other universities with accredited and approved programs that can be delivered to students in Anchorage? The only way we eliminate the risk to students is to provide programs from our fully accredited schools at UAS and UAF. Now, there's risk to the university as well. I guess we could reduce that risk of failing CAPE or board approval over the next 3 years by requiring our students at UAA to sign a statement accepting the risk of non-licensure due to UAA's failure to obtain accreditation or approval, and waiving any claims they might make against the university in that potential event. I don't think so. That untenable option and its attendant uncertainties, along with the fact that we have certain options provided by UAF and UAS, argues strongly against continuing the initial licensure programs at Anchorage. And while this certainty point should suffice on its own, there are additional points weighing in my recommendation to you. All 3 of our universities provide programs and services to students in other locations. A shining example is UAA's nursing programs provided to students all across Alaska. We are fully capable of using this and other models to provide education preparation programs to students in Anchorage. The next is cost. We can deliver UAF and UAS programs in Anchorage using fewer total faculty and staff. Yes, UAF and UAS will need additional faculty and staff, but not as many as are currently in place in all 3 programs. A conservative estimate of annual cost reduction is $500,000 a year. Now, cost is most certainly not the main driver of my recommendation. Remember, that main driver is our commitment to a certain path to licensure from an accredited and approved program in Anchorage. But cost is not a trivial consideration during these very difficult and probably increasingly difficult budgetary times. The next factor that weighed in my recommendation is focus. As we look at the likelihood of continued budget cuts, we must tighten the focus of each of our universities into their core strengths. 3 separate schools of education in a state of our small population, each with the expertise, resources to provide high quality, accredited and approved programs, when a $10 million budget cut is probably our best case for the coming year? I don't think so. And a $134 million cut proposed by the governor, while extreme, is not out of the question. Urgency. In this case, as in all cases, our students' interests should and always come first, along with the certainty of accredited and approved programs provided in Anchorage in face-to-face and online formats. We need to give our students certainty around what's next. A decision is needed now so that our students can then choose the best path for them. In addition to that, we need a decision now so that our faculty at all three universities know the direction we are heading. My recommendation has raised a number of good questions. First, what has been the role of the Alaska College of Education at UAS, and what will its role be going forward? The Alaska College of Education has been and will continue to coordinate and work on standardization and make recommendations and advise on ways to improve educator preparation in Alaska. It is not intended to substitute for direct supervision of our educational programs at UAF or UAA. While UAF and UAS programs, will they be entirely online? Some have raised that question. No. Some of UAA's current programs are online. Some of UAFs and UASs that would be coming in would be a mix of both modalities, just as current programs are at UAA, so face-to-face programs and online. Another question, will fees and other administrative matters be coordinated? And the answer is absolutely yes. Just as our nursing students in Juneau and Fairbanks are served well and with coordinated support services, so will education students in Anchorage. What about the baccalaureate degree in early childhood education? As I'm informed by the experts in the field, a BA in early childhood education is not required for licensure as for employment in a Head Start or other early childhood education program. The AAS degree is, and that will be available. In addition to that, UAF offers a baccalaureate degree in elementary education, and a certificate is available in early childhood, which actually provides increased employment opportunities for graduates of that program because they have more flexibility once they get out into the workforce. Another question, is planning for credit transfer available? Absolutely yes. That'll be a first step with progress already made with the 100 students who have already transferred to UAS and UAF. Another question, how will program differences, for example, the year-long student teaching period required at UAS and UAF be handled? The answer, certainly, there are differences in these programs and faculty are reviewing those requirements, and I am looking at some form of financial support, perhaps from personnel savings, to be allocated to students to ease these burdens. Finally, how did you decide which programs at UAF and UAS to provide in Anchorage? Based on evaluation from Vice President Lair and input from the Alaska College of Education and the chancellors, three basic factors. One is accreditation status. UAF is fully accredited by CAPE for a 7-year period. UAS is in that process. It is accredited now, but is in now the CAPE accreditation review process. The second factor is the depth and capacity of the faculty and the programs. And upon my review and the presentations made by the campuses, UAF offers greater depth and more capacity to enroll the students at UAA. And finally, the UAF plan, as a result largely of that depth and capacity, requires fewer faculty to provide its programs in Anchorage. In closing, none of us wants to be here today considering this issue, but unfortunately we are. The key question is not whether we have confidence in our faculty or our alumni or our students, and not whether we are committed to our university. Of course we do. And it's certainly not what's best for one university or another university. Rather, it's what's best for our students and the several, in my view, fatal uncertainties of seeking accreditation and approval. I don't believe those uncertainties are best for our students when they have a certain path to licensure from accredited and approved programs in Anchorage as provided by this recommendation. So, Mr. Chair and members of the board, I'm joined by the chancellors, some here in the room and others online, Interim Director Dibdahl and the Executive Dean of the Alaska College of Education, Vice President Layer, and others for responses to any questions you may have. Thank you for the opportunity to present.
Thank you for your presentation. I would like to open up the motion for discussion. First, I'd like to call on Regent Perdue as the chair of the Student Affairs Committee to give her first overview of this recommendation.
Thank you, Regent.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I can't hear you. I don't know if the microphone could go closer. I just hear your voice comes in very softly.
Okay, I'll try to, can you hear me right now?
That's much better, thank you.
Okay, I'll try to focus on the mic. I had my head turned because Regent Perdue is away from the mic, but I'll try to remember to focus on the mic when I'm talking. Thank you. So I was just asking, as the chair of the Student Affairs Committee, for Regent Perdue to lead off our discussion.
Thank you, Regent Davies. Just a couple of general comments and then maybe one specific comment on one program area. I am also very sad about being here today, and it's a pretty challenging situation. I have tried to read all of the comments that Alaskans have sent us, and it's been very helpful to get the input. We are in an emergency situation because we owe it to our students to let them know what's available to them in the summer and the fall. And so I believe we must act today so that our faculty can make preparations for offering academic continuance. I think there is a lot of disagreement or disinformation or professional disagreement, let's say, about the issue of whether our programs could pass the State Board of Education approval process basically whenever we apply, which would be very soon, probably June, maybe sometime a little bit after that. And as I understand it, all of the programs, the way that the CAPE accreditation works, all of the programs must come as a unit. It's not that 2 would pass and 5 would not, or some combination. The whole unit would have to be reviewed and approved. I am not an expert in this, so I really do have to depend on the recommendation of our experts and of our president on this area. But this is pivotal for me, because if we cannot ensure that all of our programs would pass, then we would be in a very dangerous situation coming into the summer or the fall. I'm appreciating the energy that people have devoted to this. I'm appreciating the fact that we have a full university with multiple talents to take up the slack as needed, and that's where we are. I would say that I would like to talk particularly about early childhood, because early childhood is it's an emerging and extremely important area of education, in my opinion. I worked in my career with early intervention and the Part C area, and understand and believe in that vision. There are continued studies that need to be done, in my mind, about early education. We have an AAS degree, which is robust, and it articulates into the BA degree. And I think, by all accounts, it's highly successful. We also have 2 accreditations for our bachelor's in early childhood. One is CAPE, and the other is National Association of the Education of Young Children. And I don't understand whether the bachelor's could stand alone with the NAAC recommendation certification versus the CAPE. And so, the program in BA serves multiple multiple audiences, multiple professions. And I think it's a fundamental as we move forward in supporting early childhood that we understand whether the CAPE accreditation is single and alone, what's important for the VA in elementary, in early childhood. That is a detail of to some degree when you have several programs, but it's important. It's a very important area for the state of Alaska. So I guess I am hoping in this conversation today that we do move forward, but that we also perhaps gain a little bit more expertise on the early childhood VA, and if that time would allow that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, is there any further discussion on it?
Dale.
Regent Anderson, go ahead.
First of all, I want to support the idea of discontinuing these programs at UAA. But this is not the time, nor is it a way to sit down and try to make this big of a decision. I believe this is one of the largest decisions that this board has made since the time of breaking off community colleges. It is a time when we need to sit down together, look face to face, and have the discussion at another time. You talked about focusing on the strengths, and I fully agree with that. And this is a very pivotal conversation that we're having. And the recommendation came out from President Johnson, given to the public, and it creates a by doing it that way before we have the board discussion, it creates an adversarial type of atmosphere, both in the public and within the board. Therefore, at this point, I would like to make a motion to table this conversation, this decision, until our June meeting.
I will second that.
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, don't we have a motion on the table already?
We do, and I think unfortunately, I think this motion is not really debatable, but I think it's the chair finds it to be out of order in the sense that we haven't even begun a discussion of it yet. So it would preclude the opportunity for any other regent to comment on the issue at hand. And so I would respectfully request that the maker of the motion withdraw it until some later time in the meeting.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, was that Regent Tuber?
Yes, it is. Point of order, Mr. Chair. I believe that the motion that was made is in order, and it takes precedence over the motion on the table. It's been properly seconded, and I believe it would be your responsibility to direct the recording secretary to call the roll.
Yeah, I understand that. And unfortunately, that's what I'm going to do.
I think it's worth clarifying, Mr. Chair, that it is not a motion to lay the matter on the table or to table the motion, because that would be a temporary move till later in this meeting. As I'm understanding the maker of the motion's intent, it's to delay it to a time certain.
That is correct.
And generally, that time is then specified to something, if only as general as the call of the chair or something like that.
No, the time certain would be at our June meeting when we are face to face.
Thank you.
Okay, the motion before us is to postpone the discussion to the June meeting.
And Mr. Chair, if I may I clarify, was it Regent Parker that seconded that motion?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, roll call, Regent Purdue,
No.
Regent Sweet,
Go ahead. No.
Regent Banya,
No.
Regent O'Neill,
No.
Regent Parker,
Yes.
Regent Hargraves,
No.
Regent Beretta,
Yes.
Regent Tuber,
Yes.
Regent Anderson,
Yes.
Regent Hughes,
No.
Regent Davies,
No.
4 in favor, 7 opposed.
Okay, the motion to postpone has failed. So the main motion is still in front of us. Is there any further discussion of the motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, is this Regent Parker?
Yes, it is.
Yes. Go ahead, please.
So, thank you, President Johnson, for the explanation on your rationale behind the decisions. In some of the materials that you provided us in February, some of the programs like the Bachelor of Elementary Education and Special Education Certificate, those are offered both at UAS and UAF. And I think you misspoke when you mentioned the College of Education at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. It's really the College of Education at the University of Alaska Southeast. Anyway, those programs are also offered at UAS, but you've indicated you want them at UAF. Why not UAS, since we're trying to build the College of Education through the University of Alaska Southeast? And then after that, I would have another question.
As I indicated, Regent Parker, the reasons for, and there were several, for selecting UAF's programs for delivery in Anchorage over UAS's. But I think it's important to note that it is not, in my view, the role of the Alaska College of Education to be the sole provider of educator preparation programs in Alaska. Wasn't my intent 2 years ago, isn't my intent today. Rather, the role of that body is to pull together, to coordinate, to where possible standardize our programs, but to do so through recommendations through the Academic Council and ultimately through the chancellors in my office, and to the extent we need to coordinate programs, to you as the Board of Regents. So it was not my intent that the Alaska College of Education would direct or provide all education programs in Alaska. I don't believe that's its scope, and nor would I expect it to play that role going forward. But moving forward, as I indicated in my early remarks, it seems to me, and again, I got counsel from experts in the field, that UAF's programs, one, it has a 7-year accreditation. It's not under review, it's done. Second, it has more capability. It has a deeper bench. And it can absorb the Anchorage students more easily and at lower cost.
So Regent Parker, is that okay, or did you have a second question?
I had a second question.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
So when you started this process, you asked each of the campuses to submit proposals. Instead of that, why didn't we start from the process of having UAA, UAS, UAF work collaboratively so we could develop a streamlined, coordinated approach going forward versus as we are doing within the campuses competing, and that's what they were doing is UAA, UAF, and UAS were competing, and it's laid out in the memo that was presented to us. So why didn't we have coordinated, collaborative approach from the beginning?
I often wonder that question myself, Regent Parker, and have found that when separate universities have separate interests, it takes a statewide review and a statewide perspective to mediate and, in the end, decide what is to be recommended to you. I think we all know that there are tensions in systems, and there are no question tensions in our system, again, just as there are in all university systems. And there is a tension between a statewide view that is often held by the system administration. That's why, in large part, you have a system administration. And then there are local perspectives, regional perspectives, and programmatic perspectives that are often advocated by those specific universities. There's nothing evil or bad or immoral about that. It is inherent in university systems. And so I think that there even can be positive competition. So I think it is reasonable to invite the campuses to put their proposals on the table, to involve experts from all three universities in evaluating those proposals before pulling those together and making a summary recommendation to you.
Did you, Regent Parker?
But
did you
that
follow
part, the latter part, hasn't been done yet. At this point, it's the top-down approach without the campuses being able to collaborate, coordinate, and figure out a streamlined alignment for going forward. So.
Did you have a response to that?
No, I've responded. Thank you.
Okay.
Chair Davies, this is Dale Anderson.
Okay, Regent Anderson.
The reason I asked, and in this type of thing, it is non-debatable to do a tabling motion. So I can't express all my views before I put the motion in. This decision that we are making today has decade-long ramifications. And all due respect, President Johnson, I know you have done an incredible amount of work and pulled together all kinds of ideas. But I believe the order in which this is presented is the same thing that happened back in November of 2016 when we were establishing the College of Education. And you put this recommendation out and then we have to come back. Now we're fighting. We're not discussing, we're fighting. It's adversarial. And you got the system backwards. You should have your ideas, come to the board, and then let us work it out. But to do this over the phone is wrong. It is, it's not the proper way to run this kind of decision through the system. And I
I am very disappointed in the fact that 6 out of 7 programs are being sent to Fairbanks. I believe you're trying to accomplish the agenda that you had in November of 2016 and putting the School of Education in Fairbanks. You have waited way over to Fairbanks, and Fairbanks has never accepted the fact that the School of Education is in June. And they're constantly bickering, and this turf war is totally wrong and needs to be stopped and do something best for the students instead of trying to build an empire in Fairbanks.
Mr. Chair,
Yes,
this is Regent O'Neill.
go ahead, please.
So I want to thank Karen Purdue for her work leading the Student Academic Affairs Committee and for the countless hours that she spent really, looking at all the information and at the same time putting the students in the center of the committee's decision making. So thank you, Karen. And I also heard from Regent Purdue, as the committee has done their work, is there's a real urgency around timing, is that when we get past all of the regional politics, be what they may, that we really need to keep the students in the center of this decision, and that they need us to move forward quickly because we need to put out schedules for summer and winter, or summer and fall and winter and spring and so forth. So I understand this is a really difficult decision for all of us, and I also understand it may not be the best means for meeting, but because of the timing, we do need to make a decision and move forward for our students. And I also want to thank Mary for her initial comments as well. And I'm looking to you, Mr. Chairman, to tell me if what your thoughts are. I do have a request, and I'm not sure if we take this request up as part of this motion or if this would be just a request back to the president. But as we have spoke about and referenced the UAA nursing model, a model that pioneered the delivery of high-quality accredited academic programs from Anchorage campuses across the state, using a mix of face-to-face delivery and distance teaching, where faculty live and work in communities, of course, across the state, and where they deliver these academic programs, and where students living in their home communities can complete their academic requirements. That we support this same model, which would allow us for a robust campus delivery of accredited education degrees at UAA, and that these programs may be delivered on UAA campus by UAS and UAF university faculty from accredited programs to meet student needs. So this is my ask you, Mr. Chair, is that, and I believe this is also what the president has proposed, that we would request as regents to a plan to be presented at the June meeting, which proposes policies to enhance student access and inter-university collaboration to address the needs of UAA students enrolled in the School of Education initial licensure program.
Yes, and this is Regent Davies. I believe that we pass this motion. It's essentially approving option 3, which contemplates that exact thing that you've laid out. And I'll look to the president to confirm that.
Yes, that's right, Mr. Chair. And there are issues that have arisen even in the nursing program among the universities, and you're well aware of those issues regarding calendars and fee payment schedules and other, sharing of revenues and fees. So those issues, I think, demand resolution as soon as possible so that we can make sure that this model works in this case, and as we look forward and entertain the likelihood of the need to employ it in other academic areas, we want to make sure that it is as convenient and streamlined and easy to understand and consistent for our students as possible, no matter where they are, no matter what program they're in.
And just one other thing, with respect, Mr. President, to the non-initial licensure programs, it's your intent to come back with a recommendation at the May meeting. Is that correct?
That's correct, Regent Davies.
Okay, so Regent O'Neill, does that satisfy your question?
Yes, because what I heard the president say is that this is actually the work that's going to be done if we pass this motion, correct?
Correct. Right. That's my expectation also.
Mr. Chair.
Regent Hughes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that, and again, I need your guidance. Gloria and I need guidance today, I guess. I believe that the board, in developing and proceeding with the concept of a united college of education, and I believe that Dale indicated that was a year and a half ago, and that may be true. I think it was in November or December. I think that perhaps we should have set up, and I don't know if it's our job to do that, but a structure that would promote this complete collaboration amongst all the chancellors. At that time, of course, we had deans, and of course now we have directors of the college, the schools. But I'm feeling that if we had, and I take this on from a standpoint of an error, we've made many, but an error that the board made in not being very extremely clear as to what the executive dean, what the responsibilities were. Because in a circumstance like we have, and I'm not going to go back, I'm not a member of Congress, so I'm not investigating anything, but I don't, there's so much happening here, and I'm only concentrating on what we are the fault of the regions. But is it appropriate for us to, as we approach what's going to happen here in the spring, to make sure that we understand clearly what relationships everybody has and what reporting functions, so that we don't get into the situation that we did, in effect, at UAA, where I was told, and I assume it's true, that the executive dean doesn't control or doesn't have a part in accreditation, and did not have a part in the case for accreditation at UAA. I think that if we're going to have an executive dean, I think that part of that, the wholeality, that's not a word, but the whole thing, the entirety, is important, because I think that we get lost amongst the administration. So I don't know if that kind of thing is necessary, and I hopefully I articulated it correctly. But I think I understood what I didn't know what I didn't know, because I thought when we did what we did and provided a kind of an umbrella that provided for an executive dean, I thought that dean was in charge. And of course, I was wrong. And so I don't want that same thing to happen to us a few months down the road when all of a sudden everybody is saying, I'm not it. And so I want us to have a firm grasp of who's in charge. I know we are, but we aren't there implementing. And so do we need to come up with some type of proposal or kind of like or perhaps having the president indicate to us how this is going to be handled, and the kind of what I thought were mishaps and errors are going to be corrected so that we have a seamless circumstance going forward?
Well, I'm going to pass the baton to the president in just a second, but I would say that clearly we need to have a full understanding of what is going to be developed moving forward, and I believe that we can request the president to provide us as full a discussion as we want. I would say, however, that I believe that in the current circumstance, that when we have three separately accredited programs, that it's difficult for the dean to have controlling effect over those separately accredited programs. But I'll let the president weigh in there.
No, I believe that's absolutely correct. We did not provide the executive dean of the Alaska College of Education any formal direct authority over the programs at UAF and UAA, and that was done intentionally because of accreditation of those programs, and that those programs are led by deans or directors and overseen by provosts and chancellors. And the executive dean's role was one of coordination and of information and collaboration and advice and recommendation. And the executive dean has served that role well. Now, it may not be as clear as we would like in terms of accountability, but given three institutions, given three sets of educator preparation programs, and the board's intent, and all this, if we go back, you'll see this, was not, again, for it to direct, but to advise and support. I think Steve in particular, just to call him out here in that role, has played a very strong role in that respect. He was key in getting the State Board of Education to provide approval of licensure for those students who are graduating this spring and summer, which was a specific call out in his portfolio to be the key connection between our programs and the State Board of Education. Again, I think the structure is what was developed at that time. If the board is not satisfied with that structure, then we certainly can revisit it. I think it would be very difficult to empower that executive dean over three separate programs at three institutions. And so I think one would really need to revisit how many education programs we have if it is the board's intent and desire to have a single education program. That's not what was created through the Alaska College of Education.
I think, Mr. President, and you can, I understand and agree with what you say, but because of the circumstance we find ourselves in now, I think it's not a subject that is appropriate perhaps at this time, but it is certainly in the board's best interest to understand. I'm not concerned so much about the substantive issues because we have, we get an understanding through all of the good work everybody does. But I think the way in which the logistics of the, if you will, organizational chart flow I think that there needs to be collaboration between and amongst whether it be chancellors and their directors of education and the executive dean, because I see that one, I don't feel comfortable that was fully, there was full collaboration, I guess. And so that might be something we could put on a future agenda, and hopefully as we've come through this time, you'll make sure that we don't see that same, in effect, lack of collaboration, because that's what we need to make this successful. It's full collaboration. Everybody's got to be all in.
Okay, yeah, I think that's something that we could look at for a future agenda item, Regent Hughes, but I think the matter for today is a bit more focused than that. So, but thank you for that comment. Is there any other discussion of the motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Regent Hargraves.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I voted against that motion to table because I think time is of the essence. I don't think we need to put this thing off forever. We've got people waiting to see what we're going to do so that they can make their personal decisions. President Johnson has done a fabulous job of nation, but everything that we have has come, it's been screened about him. He has interpreted everything, the inputs that have come to him, and that's what he's passed on to us. I personally find this teleconference and this meeting to be pretty uncertain for me. This kind of thing should have had a face-to-face workshop kind of setting. Many of the questions that I have, the information I need, would come from some of the administration of different campuses, especially that Anchorage campus. I may have come onto the board so recently that I've missed some of the information. And I have several questions about what happened here. And I know that perhaps that shouldn't influence the decision now. But I do hope that whatever happened, it does reflect some pretty poor administration on the part of somebody. I hope that all of the people who let this happen got fired. And I hope that we have job descriptions now that lets those administrative positions know that part of their responsibility is to keep accreditation. This thing is devastating to the state from top to bottom. I can't imagine how I came in here at a time when something this big is transpiring. And again, President Johnson has my sympathies. And everybody who says they understand, everybody who says they know that he has a big job here doesn't really understand. He's the only one that knows what's been put on him. And even though I have sympathy, I'm sure I don't know that he's having to go through. Now, so that's my position. I wish we could have had a face-to-face workshop where we could actually talk to some of the deans and department heads and the chancellors and get some information that would fill in some blanks for me. So that's going to make it difficult for me to vote on this motion today. If the motion is called for and we have to vote, I may have to vote against it, or I may have to vote present. Because unless a lot more comes up here today, I don't have enough information. I don't feel comfortable with making this decision that we're headed into here. And perhaps that's just me. So if it is, then the board can do what it does. But that's kind of where I'm coming from. Now, to change the subject just a little bit, this National Accrediting Association that we're working with, my research indicates that that outfit doesn't have it all together either. They've got some huge internal problems. I've talked to PhDs across the country who have worked with them, and to say that they don't hold them in high esteem or respect is kind of a point. They don't see this accrediting association as having it all together, me telling anybody how to run their program. I'll have to admit that I'm not that familiar with the national accreditation. I've worked with and I'm very familiar with regional accreditation at various schools and colleges. And the way that they have handled this really surprises me. When I asked the question why Anchorage didn't get a probationary period, somebody told me that this accrediting association didn't provide a probation period. They didn't allow people to make corrections and keep their accreditation. But in their handbook, they have a provision for 2 years of probation. What happened? You have to, I believe it was, you have 15 days after you receive the to ask for a probationary status and to have 2 years to fix it. So what's the status of that right now? These are things I would hope to find in a workshop setting, talking to administrators. So the other thing about this accrediting association, how important is it in going through the reciprocity statements of different universities across the country? Only 2 states that says they require this accreditation to receive students to be accredited in their programs. That's New Jersey and Montana. So why do we fool with this when no other state requires us to have it in order to receive our students fully certified to teach? I believe there's at least one big state that has a system where they don't have any national accreditation, but their Department of Education in the state has a team that goes out and evaluates these programs and decides whether to approve them or not. That's interesting because if I'm not mistaken, that's exactly the way the university used to do that. We have not always had a national accrediting program in place. We had NCATE, and I need to ask a question here. Some of the people who contacted us and tries to make a position refers to the University of Alaska losing its accreditation from this outfit. But back when, the last time I know of that Fairbanks had a review, it was NCATE. I think that was about 1997. Did Fairbanks actually lose its accreditation or not? President Johnson,
Yeah, Regent Hargraves, thank you. You've asked a number of questions here, and I'm happy to respond to several of them. And to the extent there's additional information, we've got Steve Atwater there, the Executive Dean of the College of Education. But let me start out with your last question, which was the NCATE accreditation at UAF. Very different situation. That was not a mandatory or required accreditation. It was a voluntary accreditation. And so, yes, UAF lost that accreditation, but most importantly, its graduates continue to be licensed by an approved program by the State Board of Education. So it was voluntary, very different than this situation. The CAPE accreditation today is required by the Board of Education because, and I'll segue to another one of your good questions, because we're not a big state. And we don't have any CAPE or accreditation experts in our state Department of Education and Early Development. They've essentially outsourced that, like many other states, to CAPE, to use their expertise for this accreditation work. So again, we don't have a big bureaucracy in the Department of Education to handle this work. As you know, I think their standards are two to be an approved program in Alaska. One, CAPE accreditation, or two, substantial compliance with CAPE standards. Those are the two requirements for approval and accreditation here in Alaska. In terms of CAPE itself, you're right. There's not a lot of love out there for it. That said, there are 196 teacher education programs currently accredited by CAPE. And by this time next year, there will be another 170 teacher education programs. They're in the queue. They're being reviewed this year. So we'll have about 66 programs by this time next year approved by and accredited by CAPE. So it is the big gorilla. And even if it were a little gorilla, it's the gorilla that our State Board of Education has chosen. So we don't have a choice about that.
Mr. Chairman,
yeah.
Could I interject something here?
Okay.
They're saying that it's the statute law that we have that accreditation. But in fact, it is a Department of Education regulation.
Yep, agreed.
It just meetings could strike that and not even require it. And then if they had maybe 3 people in their accreditation department, they could inform a team that would go to each site and look at these programs and judge whether they were quality enough or not. So I know that it's in regulation. I'm to the point where I would be willing to call on the Department of Education to take that out and forget it. Sorry, Mr. President, go ahead.
No, I appreciate your point. And if we were standing here with fully approved CAPE programs where these issues were and our standing were not in question, I think the timing would be great to make that pitch to the State Board of Education. I doubt in these fiscal times there's much likelihood of an increase in an agency's budget for this purpose, but that's mere speculation. I would ask, if Steve Atwater has anything additional he'd like to add, Regent Hargraves, if that's okay, because he is much closer to this and is much more knowledgeable, having been through a successful CAPE accreditation review when he was the dean of the education school at UAF. Steve?
Yeah, thank you, President Johnson. Through the chair, Regent Hargraves, it's important to make the distinction that the accreditation process is not a function of the university, that's a function of the state. The state requires education preparation providers to have accreditation. And so it's important to note that we don't have, as President Johnson noted, we don't have the option of choosing that. That's not our choice. We can certainly influence who does the accreditation, but that's not our choice. As you say, it's in regulation that we need to comply with. So I would add that piece there. Otherwise, in terms of doing it in-house, as the president noted, there's no capacity at the department to do that. There is no accreditation department inside of the Department of Education. Another piece that you run into in Alaska, which is you run into in any small state, is a lack of bias that you'd have a difficulty establishing people without a bias. almost everybody in Alaska has a touch or a course or something that would prejudice them with regard to reviewing programs at UAF, UAS, or UAA. All educators in Alaska, a large number of them, have touches that way, and so that makes that difficulty to as well. The states that do their own accreditation are the largest states in the country. California is a prime example of that. And so I think to expect that Alaska would assume that, while it's doable, would require an enormous amount of shifting of resource to make that happen. But I did want to stress that it is not the university's choice to pick CAPE. The university did not pick CAPE. That's the state board that picked CAPE, and we have to live with that compliance requirement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, Steve. Hey, picking that information up directly from you. My point is that the State Department of Education could drop that regulation. I would certainly make a case for dropping it. Every campus is accredited regionally by Northwest Accrediting Association. Last time I looked at that, they had glowing reports regionally. That tells us that these campuses are doing some good things, they're doing it appropriately, and they're meeting the requirements of Northwest. So I would never want to see Northwest accrediting dropped by any campus, but this national accreditation just isn't doing it for me. So, okay, I think that's all I wanted to say. If President Johnson would like to finish answering the questions I've put in.
No, I think Regent Hargraves, that was my response. You began by talking about administration, and I concur. I would just note that the chain of command, if you will, over the School of Education at UAA is new from the time the failure occurred.
Mr. Chairman, let me say to that point that my exposure to the administration at campus from the department head up really impresses me as being capable people. And I would like to give a lot of credit to their position. I don't know for sure what their positions are, but I think they're the people that can answer a lot of my questions. And I have been impressed with the administration from the department head up. So I appreciate seeing quality people in those positions.
All right. I concur, Regent Hargraves. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Regent Beretta.
Regent Beretta, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to make a couple of points as far as why I supported tabling this until the June meeting. Although I completely understand the desire to calm the waters for the students, they are our most important priority in this decision-making process. But I don't feel like we are allowing ourselves to have enough time to absorb these options. And although I have the utmost respect for President Johnson's recommendation, it is a recommendation, but there are other options that I have not completely been able to understand. And so I have questions, and I will put them out there, but that is the basis for my supporting tabling this until we have had enough time to make a meaningful decision that will impact generations to come. And so, my questions about the motion is that if we are looking at some of the other colleges who have recently been in the same situation, and if we're evaluating how they're handling this. I know that President Johnson mentioned that there's only one one person that's been deemed able to make this this accreditation process happen, but I'm just wondering if we have exhausted all the options. When I start looking at the impact of the community's responses towards this, I have to take notice. I feel I have a responsibility to the University of Alaska Anchorage to exhaust that, and that if I'm making a decision without feeling like I've done everything in my power to understand what those options are, including the responses that have been given, such as the cost and the time. In my experience, some things take time and they take money, but they're worth it in the end. And so I want to make sure that we're doing those things. And so within our Board of Regents, are we, through our committees, allowing all of our Board of Regents to have the same opportunity to understand these implications before we're forced to make these, not forced, I don't mean to imply that we're being forced, but we make a decision that is going to just turn a complete direction for education in the state of Alaska. So I wanted to put that out there and explain why I supported tabling, and I understand the severity and I understand the political landscape, but I also feel compelled to pause and allow us to make a decision based on good understanding and not choosing an option just because it's hard. Thank you.
I would, both in response to Regent Beretta and Hargary's comments about the timing of this meeting, when I was asked to set this meeting up, one of the biggest concerns that we had was that we were hearing from the students that they thought that we weren't acting fast enough. And so that's the reason why we're having this meeting today and why we're having it in this manner, because it's just, we have several other meetings that are scheduled, but it seemed like this was an urgent enough matter and that we had I felt pretty clarity on kind of what the range of options were, that given a expedited review, we'd be in a position to make a decision. But, you know, there was a lot of pressure earlier on to have to make the decision even sooner than we're facing it today. So there are trade-offs, obviously, on those issues, but I think it's important that we recognize that if we're focusing on the students, one of the things the students really wanted to have is to have a decision get made fairly quickly so that they could decide what they were going to do. And I think as we get closer and closer to the end of the budget cycle, it's going to be harder and harder to focus on that as well. So I think it's important that we, we've had almost 3 months now to grapple with this issue. So I think it's important that we do come to a conclusion here today. I hope that we'll have a vote on that. So, is there any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, go ahead.
When this thing first hit, the first thing I thought of was that Fairbanks or Juneau could do a distance delivery and cover the students in Anchorage. But I was thinking in terms of a short-term thing while Anchorage got its accreditation situation straightened out. I think that this distance delivery from Anchorage and Juneau and Fairbanks is an excellent option to keep that program going in Anchorage while they get that thing straightened out. But it just hadn't occurred to me that this would become the permanent way to education program, most populated center of the state. I just wanted to be sure I made that clear, since back early I did say that it was an option, but it was to be limited to the period of time that it takes to get accreditation.
If I may, Mr. Chairman, Regent Hargrave's good point. The challenge there goes to the main reason why I made the recommendation I made, and that is the lack of certainty of that process of seeking accreditation and Board of Education approval during that time. And so there's a real serious question: why would a student enroll in a program that where the accreditation and program approval are uncertain, where the student is going to pay tuition, put all that work in at a UAA program, and then not get licensed, possibly? That wouldn't make rational sense, I don't think, for that student. And I would suggest also, and I take your point here about UAS and UAF coming in, it's not just online. A lot of the programs are face-to-face, so there will be that kind of support for our students, or at least those who elect to transfer. But again, it goes back to that question of certainty for our students, and that really is the core foundation of my recommendation to you. Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
Mr. Chairman.
Chairman.
Just a minute. Who besides Regent Hargraves, who's trying to seek the floor?
Regent Anderson.
Okay, Regent Anderson, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman.
Regent Hargraves, can you stand by for a moment, and I want to hear from Regent Anderson, and then I'll come back to you.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm pretty passionate about process, and I'm pretty passionate about fairness, and I'm pretty passionate about people working together in a collaborative fashion. My vote for this, I vote against this motion is based on that. We are making a decision without collaboration, and we've got to rethink the process that this went through to bring it to the table today. Thank you.
Regent Hargraves.
Mr. Chairman, to the President, do we know what accreditation is for Juneau or Southeast? Am I correct that they're in the evaluation at this time?
Yes, Regent Hargraves. UAS has, of course, its institutional accreditation under the Northwest Commission, so check. And it is in that review process, but standing strong. And its education programs are also NCATE accredited now, but in the process of transitioning to CAPE accreditation. And it's in that process. Chancellor Caulfield is on the line and could provide a bit more detail as to exactly where UAS education programs are in the CAPE process, if that would be helpful.
I'd like to know.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. To Regent Hargrave's question, our Alaska College of Education faculty, working under the leadership of Executive Dean Steve Atwater, have been working very diligently to prepare a self-study, which has now been submitted to CAPE. And work continues on preparing for a site visit that will take place here in Juneau in November of 2019. And we've done that work with any number of community partners and also with a consultant who's assisted with the CAPE process, very familiar with that process, and has been a huge help to us. So we're looking forward to a successful outcome of that November 2019 site visit. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, any further discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. This is Regent Parker. So thank you, Regent Hargraves, for the information that you provided. Was I correct when I heard that the Board of Education could give the teaching certificates if a program showed substantial compliance with CAPE, even though it had not completed its accreditation process? And then I have a follow-up comment after that.
Regent Parker, Jim Johnson here. Yes, there are two requirements for board approval. One is CAPE accreditation. The other is substantial compliance with CAPE standards. You're correct.
Okay. And was Regent Hargraves correct when he said that there could have been an appeal submitted, but that was not done by us? The request to go to probation?
If I may, Mr. Chair. That's correct, Regent Parker. UAA determined not to appeal. I believe Chancellor Sandine made that particular decision.
If I might add additional details to that, this is Chancellor Sandine. One can appeal based on process, not submitting additional data. So based on our situation, we were not in a position to appeal.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. I know based on comments and information we have received that the University of Alaska Anchorage School of Education has worked to get to substantial compliance with CAPE, but we're still till January 2020 before that could even happen. I want to go on record as agreeing with Regent Hughes and Regent Anderson on the necessity for collaboration amongst the deans. The College of Education needs to work with the University of Alaska Anchorage, University of Alaska Southeast, and University of Alaska Fairbanks to develop programs that are streamlined, coordinated, and aligned. And that should be the goal that we focus on as we move forward with the College of Education, that the three are streamlined, coordinated, and aligned. And I have deliberated quite a bit as to how to proceed. And I know providing the certainty and offering that certainty to students is important. However, my stomach's gone back and forth, and my initial gut reaction was to continue to support going forward with getting a reaccreditation for the School of Education at the University of Alaska Anchorage. And then I went back the other way. And then when I got the President's memo about he was going to move to abolish the entire School of Education in University of Alaska Anchorage, even those accredited programs, my instinct was then to, try to continue to work hard to keep those strong programs alive and moving forward here in the state of Alaska. So no matter what the outcome, I do hope that the College of Education works with Anchorage, Southeast, and Fairbanks to develop programs that are streamlined, coordinated, and aligned. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, are there any other questions or comments or discussion?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I echo the sentiments that have been broadly expressed about the greater need for collaboration. I think we've been clear on that. I think we have seen in the past bits in pieces. The statewide Teacher Education Council, for example, I can't say I'm especially familiar with their work in particular, but I know they have been an example of that in the past. And I think as we move forward, particularly because of this budget environment that we're in, we need to refocus perhaps on greater collaboration between all three campuses, as well as our community campus partners, certainly. Ultimately, I share the sentiments expressed at the very start of the meeting that this is being done with a heavy heart, but I do believe that we need to make a decision right now to provide that certainty for our students. I know that it's going to be an unpopular decision, but the correct decisions in my mind sometimes are the ones that are unpopular or appear to be unpopular. So I will vote in favor of this motion, primarily because it will provide certainty for students, a specific path to licensure. My last comment is that I want to make sure, and I think this is probably broadly understood, but I want to make sure that we're still communicating this to the public in a way that is very clear, very succinct. I think particularly for students, when they hear, should this motion go through, I think when students hear it, it's going to be very prone to misunderstanding. There's a lot of nuance. It's at once a very student-facing concern and a very sort of bureaucratic facing students kind of issue. So interviews with student media, for example, things like that, whatever it takes to speak to all constituencies broadly, but students in particular, about what the next steps of this process look like. We're going to be very prone to misinformation and misunderstanding, and we need to be very, very disciplined in cutting through that and making sure that students understand the decision, why it was made, how it was made, and what the next steps look like. Thank you.
Thank you, Regent Sweet. I appreciate those comments. I think that's exactly correct. Regent Perdue.
Just a comment, maybe a question for the president. It looks to me like the vote will be close, or not sure how it will. What are the outcomes from delay?
Well, thank you, Regent Perdue. Uncertainty among our students. What are they going to do in terms of registration for next year? They need to make decisions now in the next month or so to register and be primed to continue their educational pathways. Second is the faculty and the programs that they deliver to our students. How are we going to make the moves, make the changes, hire the people, etc., so that we can actually deliver these programs to our students in Anchorage. Those decisions can't happen over a weekend. They need to happen as soon as absolutely possible, because this decision definitely impacts their professional lives as well. So it's both the students and certainty on their part so that they can plan for next year, and our faculty and the program leaders so that they can be ready to provide top quality programs and services to our students going forward.
Regent Bania here.
Regent Bania, go ahead, please.
Yes, a couple of comments. One, I believe it would be extremely unfair to all involved to put this off. Secondly, I would venture to say that the decision, hopefully the decision will be to support this motion. And if it were put off, which I hope it is not, the decision would be no different in June or May or whenever the next meeting would be. And last, in some respects, even though this is a trying time and it's emotional for many people, in many ways I look upon this as something positive, in that similar mistakes certainly will not be made in the future. Working together collaboratively and perhaps some type of consolidation will occur from this. So I'm looking at it from a different point of view. I think going forward that a lot of good will come out of this.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chairman.
Regent Hargreaves.
You might direct this to Steve, President Johnson, but they mentioned a consultant working with East. Is this a consultant that they pay for as accreditation agency? Does it help campuses to help them get through the accrediting process?
Yeah, thanks. Go ahead, please, Steve.
Okay. Yeah, Regent Hargreaves, the consultant that UAS has hired is a private contractor. She is, however, a certified CAPE reviewer, and so the person is coming from the inside. CAPE does offer assistance and support, primarily through conferences and also some online webinar type support. But UAS has taken an extra step by hiring a consultant to help with the preparation of the self-study.
Smart. I appreciate the Northwest Accrediting Association had help with the secondary schools in the state. If a school district had Stone, Johnstone, would be right out there representing the Northwest Accrediting to help us. So I'm happy to hear that they do provide with some help. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, again, are there any other questions or comments? Discussion?
John?
Mr. Perdue.
One more comment. I still have a concern about early childhood bachelor's degree, and others have other concerns, but that is a concern that we heard a lot about from the public. And my concern is that the bachelor's degree is in early childhood is not offered in other places as it's configured at UAA, and it articulates from the AAS into the bachelor's, is my understanding. I am concerned about the market and employment and how our bachelor's matches up with the new plans at the other campuses. And I know that there are collaborations, and I note that you have asked President Johnson for in our May-June meeting for quite a bit of follow-up on that issue regarding the bachelor's and how that might investigate the feasibility, demand, and need for constituting a standalone ECA program on Anchorage, either at UAF, US, and reporting to the board in May. And I want to understand what will happen to the students this next year, as I'm understanding that might be a challenge to create a new program in time for the academic year, since this is the one program that does not articulate across our other systems.
Well, thank you, Regent Perdue. I am not expert in that detail, but Chancellor White, is Amy Vinlove on the line? Because if she is, she, I think, would be the right person to address that question. Amy, are you online? No? Okay, maybe Steve, can you handle that question for Regent Perdue? Thank you.
Yes, I can. Regent Perdue, UAF is proposing that a student transfer to their Bachelor of Art of Elementary And with 18 credits of early childhood, be able to secure an endorsement in early childhood. That endorsement from the state would allow you licensure to go to work as a preschool teacher. And so without a bachelor's degree in early childhood, you can secure the licensing portion from the state to go to work. You don't need a bachelor's degree to secure that license. You need an endorsement, which can be attained through a minor or through 18 credits of early childhood work, which the existing students will have completed that level, I understand, of 18 credits, and then could transfer that to the endorsement in early childhood. Their degree would be in Bachelor of Arts in Elementary Education, and then the endorsement that they would add would be early childhood on top of that.
Follow-up. So, Dean Atwater, would that allow them to practice, so to speak, in a K-12 setting as well?
Yeah. Yes, the endorsement is for pre-K 3, and so for a preschool in a public school, that would allow them licensure to practice in a public school preschool, yes.
Okay, any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, this is Regent Beretta.
Regent Beretta, go ahead, please.
Thank you. So if this decision is made, is it possible within a year or so that these can be reestablished within the University of Alaska Anchorage?
I'm looking to President Johnson to respond to that.
I think it would be theoretically possible, Regent Beretta. Practically, I would be skeptical. I mean, that's looking ahead a year from now. Theoretically, the board can establish a program as it chooses, whenever. And so again, you would have the authority to do that if you so chose.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments or discussion? I'm not hearing any, so Brandy, could you call the roll on the motion, please?
Regent O'Neill?
Yes.
Regent Perdue?
Yes.
Regent Parker?
No.
Regent Tuber?
No.
Regent Anderson?
No.
Regent Hargraves?
No.
Regent Hughes?
Yes.
Regent Banya?
Yes.
Regent Sweet?
Yes.
Regent Beretta?
No.
Regent Davies?
Yes.
6 in favor, 5 opposed.
So by a vote of 6 to 5, the motion is carried. So I would like to take a 5-minute break and then come back to the budget discussion, item 3 on our agenda. So that'll be at 3:25.
Thank you.
Very sad. Very sad.
You know what?
It was a very good day, actually.
And it was administrative mismanagement.
order. It's 3:30. And the next item on our agenda is the budget discussion. And I look to President Johnson to lead us through the discussion.
Thank you very much. Members of the board, appreciate this opportunity to update you on where we are with the budget process for FY 2020. We last discussed this in March. There is a presentation that I'll walk through here, and it is also posted on the board's website for those of you who do not have access to our video here, so you can see the presentation. I'll touch on why we're here today. I want to remind us of the strengths and goals and touch on the challenges, but really hit on the opportunities that we have here at the university. It's all, yes, there's some bad news and there are difficult decisions, very, very difficult decisions, I think, will be forthcoming. They will be required of us. I'll talk about the budget in summary, some of the work we've done to enhance our revenues and bring our expenses down. We're not new to this. Recall we've been cut 4 out of the last 5 years. Coming up with a few cases of what scenarios we might face. So I want to share those with you. And I think one of them is I've changed these, modified these in consultation with the Chancellor since our March meeting. I'll talk about some structural options and then go into our next steps. And then the appendix has a ton of data for you. I didn't feel that it would be a useful expenditure of our time to go through all of that. So I would encourage you to, a lot of descriptive information about the university, facilities, faculty and staff, students, budgets, and all sorts of aspects of the University of Alaska. But I'm going to focus here really on the front section of this presentation and hope that it fosters a thorough and discussion among you. So the purpose of this conversation today is I want to review our advocacy work. I want to give you an update on the budget. I want to talk a little bit about the possibility, a small p, but a possibility of a multi-year funding compact. And I want to discuss some position and program adjustments that we might need to accommodate potential cuts while we are making strategic investments. And then finally discuss, without a request for decision from you, discuss some structural options in light of potential cuts. So in terms of advocacy here, I'll just talk over this. We have created a UA Strong, that's our motto, our brand is UA Strong, Facebook page to serve as the vehicle to deliver our advocacy messages. The page now has 1,100 users and is growing every single day. We're sharing news and updates with other coalitions, K-12, healthcare, labor, on a daily basis. We created a UA Strong weekly update, and we distribute it to those who receive our capital report, as well as to others who opt in via the UA Strong Facebook page. Today, we have a total of 7,600 subscribers to the Facebook page, so very positive there. We have created and distributed to our supporters UA Strong pins, UA Strong stickers, temporary tattoos, window clings for car windows that say, I support the university and I vote. We're currently developing student videos, and actually some students have gotten ahead of us and developed some of their own videos, which are fantastic. And we're posting those on our UA Strong Facebook page, showing our students telling their stories on why UA is important to them. We've generated a lot of media coverage of the Coalition of Student Leaders rally in Juneau on March 18th. We generated a lot of media based on interviews with Dermot Cole and Matt Buxton and Jeff Landfield, Dave Steeren, the editorial boards of papers here in the state. So I think we're getting actually quite a lot of very strong coverage. We've gotten editorials written that have been supportive of the university. We've completed statewide polling on the development of our messages and on audiences that we should target and the right media to use to target those audiences with key influential messages. We've developed an outreach list with folks who've with personal connections to key legislators and asked those key influences to make calls on our behalf. We've turned out several hundred UA supporters to testify at House Finance community meetings and for House Finance public testimony. We've started to develop geo-targeted messaging, and we've developed a list of supporters who will write letters to the editor and op-ed pieces, and we'll be starting that outreach this week. We've developed and delivered multiple presentations to the Senate and House Finance committees. I delivered the State of the University address with over 200 people in person. I want to thank Chancellor White for sponsoring that, and the other chancellors for sponsoring groups in Juneau and Anchorage. We had over 1,000 folks tune in to watch online via our feed, and that included the Fairbanks Chamber, and it was also aired on 360 North across the state. We're currently have geo-targeted ads running promoting the Senate public testimony this week, and ads promoting today's filming, and ads growing our Facebook page. And again, more geo-targeted ads will run to promote our message. You might ask, what is this geo-targeting? Basically, it's using modern technology to drive our messages to geographically targeted audiences in key legislative areas. This is a technique that's been developed over the last number of years in political campaigns and certainly is used very actively in marketing. And so we are using those techniques. I would note this is a privately funded effort. University resources are not used in support of this advocacy work. So I'm moving on to slide 6. Alaska has challenges and UA can help. I've listed these and provided these challenges before to you. And I do think it's critically important not simply to dwell on these, but to move from them and connect ourselves to them. We are a solution to these challenges. There is no single institution in Alaska more powerful, more resourced, more ready, more committed to addressing these challenges than the University of Alaska. We also have opportunities in Alaska, our location, and our indigenous people who bring tremendous history and culture and strength and grit and opportunity to our state. We have resources. We have a role in national security. We have opportunities to develop alternative energy sources and be a global model for microgrids and a sustainable ocean economy and a way to develop our natural resources sustainably, to be a world leader in UAV testing and development. And there are many, many, many other opportunities that we uniquely have in Alaska that we can support here at our university. Slide 8 goes through these strengths and how we can address the state's challenges to create those opportunities. Our constitutional status, our history, our alumni, our facilities, most importantly, our faculty and our staff, our research excellence, our students, the commitment we have to our students' success, our alumni, and the very important economic impact that we have across the state. We have a framework, a guiding framework for our university system, Strategic Pathways, which identifies at a very high strategic level what it is we do together and what it is we do as unique and distinctive academic institutions. I think you've all seen this, and its utility is we look at it and touch base on it every day. For example, when we look at opportunities to reduce a cost through increased collaboration or coordination across the system, we look at these concepts here. When we look at how we can refine or tighten the focus of each one of our universities, we refer to this because this describes, not comprehensively, but this describes in general at a high level what each of our 3 universities delivers to our state. This is a strength, the goals and measures established by the Board of Regents. These goals tie to the needs and opportunities of our state. So I think that connection of service to Alaska is very important, and I commend and appreciate the board's formulation of these goals and the board's adherence to these goals. And we're also making progress in numerous areas toward the board's goals. And of course, slide 11 here is the vision work that began with the board's leadership last summer. And we developed an interactive website and an accompanying video to try to get out to Alaskans a much needed positive message, a positive vision for Alaska's future. And I emphasize much needed because unfortunately at this time, so much of what's being discussed is not at all positive and not at all aspirational. And so again, our role is to be out there being positive and creating that vision for a long-term, sustainable, strong future for our state and our people. Moving into the budget, slide 13, you know the story here. The orange just keeps on getting bigger and bigger. And now I should note here, and we could update this slide and maybe stick in a little line here that puts the House number in this budget. So the blue for FY19, the current year, the unrestricted general fund has appropriated by the state. That's the state money, not the UGF. I'm sorry, the DGF. This is the state money here at 327. The House Finance Committee has recommended $317 million to the full House. We expect that number to hold. Again, it's a political process. There may be amendments, but we expect that that number will hold. Okay. Moving on to slide 14. This is a slide, again, I think you've seen before. It's I think a very effective slide in sharing with folks how it is we spend our UGF, our DGF, and other funds across the 3 pillars of our mission: education, research, and service, and then how much of that goes to support our people, the number of Alaskans served, how much cost is recuperated in each one of these areas, how important it is to our mission, and how effective we are in serving that mission. Slide 15 is a summary of the governor's FY20 budget proposal. And the key points here are the blue going down under the governor's proposal rather dramatically from 327 to 193. So that's the $134 million proposed cut, or 41% of that blue, that UGF. The green part of the budget is our authority. That's the designated general funds. And so conveniently, that has been increased to result in a modest budget increase for the university. I would note the green part is not real. We go get that. Our faculty, our staff go out and get that money through programs, through enrollment, through tuition, through grants and contracts, etc. So I think it's critically important also to note not only the dramatic decrease proposed for our UGF and the virtual increase in our budget via an increase in DGF, it's also important to note that the governor's proposal includes a separate appropriation. So instead of one single appropriation for the University of Alaska, the proposal is for two appropriations, one for the universities and one for the community campuses. So that creates an issue for us, a structural issue in the budget proposal. I would note that coming out of the House, we expect a single appropriation. That's not necessarily to predict what the Senate will do, but that's what we see coming out of the House. Slide 17 here summarizes for you, and I won't go through this in detail, but how we have worked at the system level and at each of the universities to enhance revenues. And some of these are done, some are in process, and some are in front of us. There is much more that we have done also to enhance revenues, and we're constantly looking at ways to do that. And I do believe that, especially if we're able to get on a stable budget footing, that we'll be able to emphasize a lot more of our activity and our focus to revenue enhancement. It's one of the strong arguments that is actually well received by legislators for a possible multi-year compact, so that instead of us expending huge time and focus on the annual appropriation cycle, if we're able to get more certainty about state appropriations going forward, we will be able to focus much more of our effort and our resources on revenue enhancement from other sources, and also moving to the next slide, expense reduction. In many cases, expense reduction actually requires investment. So a good example would be process improvement, process standardization, and process automation. That requires resources to accomplish. And we have made investments in process improvement and are committed to doing more of that going forward. And needless to say, expense reduction is something we invest in, but it's also something that to some extent has happened to us. And there are sometimes unpredictable and negative results that come from that. When we are reducing faculty and we're reducing staff, and yet the requirements on those remaining staff are not relieved, we end up with stress. We end up with and this would be the case in any organization, you end up with problems. And again, I'm not trying to excuse shortcomings, but there's no question that when you have 1,283 fewer employees, that's the number over the last several years, you're going to have an increased possibility of error. Now, looking forward, our meta plan, I'm on slide 20 here, is to tie our goals and our priorities and our strategies to meet the state's needs and to create opportunities. And we advocate for what we need to meet those needs through funding, through policies, and particularly this year for a multi-year commitment. And then we go through the rather uncomfortable work of preparing for the budget we might get. There is huge uncertainty at this point in the process that makes it very, very difficult to plan. Nevertheless, we are trying to create scenarios, cases as we refer to them, that give us the sideboards, if you will, to move forward in our planning work. On this chart here, you see over the top 4 scenarios or cases. One of them is a zero cut. That's one that I suspect is not long for this slide. The next one over is a reduction of 10 million or 317 million for our UGF. That is what is now in House Finance and likely to come out of the House. The next is a 10% cut from current, and this is just picking a number that is lower. There were amendments, I would note, in House Finance to reduce our budget considerably more than 10%. But in any case, it's a reasonable scenario to work. And then finally, a $65 million cut, or 20%. Again, there were deeper cuts proposed by House Finance. I suspect that those may return on the floor of the House, but we believe that there is sufficient strength and support for the 317 that, at least on the House side, we won't be entertaining these big numbers. And you note a change in this table from the last time we met in March, and that was a scenario that had the governor's $134 million proposed reduction. And while these, especially the $65 million cut, would be very, very difficult to manage, the $134 million proposed reduction is simply not manageable. And so I don't believe, frankly, it merits our consideration. Over on the left-hand side of this chart, you see Title IX enhancement initiatives, comp, and fixed costs. And this is a summary of the items in your FY 2020 budget. And so this becomes a really important question for your consideration and discussion. To what extent are we, the board and administration, committed to moving forward on these investments? Because if we are committed to moving forward on these, and I believe, just as we have done over the last 3 years, while we've been cut, we have cut a bit deeper to invest in growth areas of strategic importance. I would suggest that we continue to do that. But as we move to the right on this table to cuts that are deeper and deeper, it does raise the question, to what extent should we continue to commit to that roughly 3% annual reallocation? Remember, in some of our discussions with Dennis Jones and Ames McGinnis from NCHEMS, they recommended, no matter what, a 3% reallocation. You need to not only be sort of defending and managing through reductions, you need to be pulling out funds that you're strategically investing, so you're able to protect investments you've already made in high priorities areas. Research, for example, nursing education, teacher education, and other really important fields for the university today, but more importantly, 5 years out and 10 years out. And so what that does is it requires reallocation, and even in, let's say, the best case that's probably not even on the table now, which is a 327 current year budget, you come down to personnel reduction, and in order to fund that reallocation and to fund those investments without new revenue, we need to reallocate. And so this is an estimate of what it would take for us to make those reallocations. And as Myron has communicated and reported to you numerous times, the lion's share of our expenditures are people. Unfortunately, I mean, fortunately, because that's our great asset. But if we're moving in the negative direction here, then that inevitably becomes a place we need to go to find cost reductions. In addition to that, facilities are a major cost area for us, and I put these numbers here on this table at my peril, because I know and respect very much the Regent's commitment to increasing our operating investments in facility maintenance. And so what this table does is, depending upon the scenario, the case, it brings down some of those investments in a stepped manner, adds those savings to the reductions we would get from personnel reductions, and this would be faculty and staff, not determined at all where these would be, but in any case, and that would then enable us to meet the proposed reduction and invest in whole or in part, large part, the initiatives that you've set out. Obviously, as you move to the right, I want to note we have talked about fiscal exigency, and as one moves to the right, that becomes more and more a potential tool, one that we absolutely do not want to use, but one which we may be forced to use in order to accommodate these reductions. In addition to that, you see possible realignment of the community campuses. That's prompted by certainly the separate appropriation, but I've asked the chancellors, and they've submitted input to my office on their thoughts about potential community campus reorganization, and I've met directly with the community campus directors on that topic. And as you go to the right here, particularly at a 20% reduction or 65 million, you really start getting to a place where we really have to decide what we're going to have to decide what we're going to stop doing in a pretty serious way. And that could involve closures, not only of programs, because I think we'll be getting to program closures well before that most severe case, but it also risks institutional accreditation. And I appreciate Regent Hargraves raising that issue earlier in this meeting on the previous topic, because we have a teach-out responsibility to our students who have indicated a commitment to a particular program. And when we start making those kinds of very significant program reductions, we do put potentially at risk accreditation. I would note that we are staying in touch with the Northwest Commission. We're very pleased with their expression of cooperation and support for us as we move through these times. They are keeping an eye on the news in Alaska, and again, they have made themselves available to meet with us, discuss these issues with them, and in fact to come to Alaska and meet with you as a board. We've done that previously. We've had the president of the Northwest Commission meet with the board, and I think that may well be an advisable thing as we move forward if the reduction scenarios look as severe as they might be. So I want to stop on this slide before getting to some of the structural options to address any questions regents may have.
Yes, go ahead.
For those online, this is Regent Parker. So campus closures, we had, you had established a community campus coalition under strategic pathways that met, but we've never heard anything back from that. So as you look at the recommendations from the chancellors, are you going to be also working with that group that you had convened previously, or what's your thoughts there, since there's still a number of outstanding issues with strategic pathways that are yet to be resolved, and this being one of them?
You bet, Regent Parker. We met with the community campus directors, I'm looking at Michelle, 10 days ago, something like that. A good long meeting. All of them contributed. They've seen the options. They weighed in on the options. It was a very, very constructive discussion. I believe two of the chancellors actually were present during that meeting. And in addition to that, I got input from the chancellors. So absolutely hearing from the community campus directors. Interestingly, one thing surprised me a little bit, and that was I thought perhaps, and it's because I hadn't spoken with them yet, that they would universally be in support of the single appropriation that was proposed by the governor. And actually a significant concern was raised about that, and that actually there was a really articulate and compelling argument made for staying with one. The argument possible for having a separate appropriation is protection of the community campuses. And interestingly, several of the community campus directors communicated that they felt more secure in a single appropriation. They felt like they would be exposed and hanging out if they were in their own appropriation. Another thing that I thought was interesting from the community campus directors was and this shouldn't come as any surprise, and that is their focus is on their communities, and that's appropriate, that's good, and on their regions. And they felt and suggested that they can actually serve their communities more effectively if they gain access to courses and programs, more access to courses and programs from other universities than those they are part of. And I thought that was interesting as well, and really a positive. That imagine someday being at the Nome commencement and not only celebrating AA degrees granted by that community campus, but also celebrating education degrees, social work degrees, baccalaureates and master's degrees from other institutions in Alaska. Now, there are very practical challenges with that in terms of student support. There's probably only one or two, and I think I'm looking at the Vice Chancellor, Yvonne Peter here. I think there's only one student support person at the Nome campus. So it'd be a challenge for her to advise appropriately and effectively students taking courses from other universities. But as a long-term vision, I think that was a very positive comment from the community campus directors. I'm happy to, if the board is interested in this, I'm happy to summarize the notes from that community campus meeting and also input from the chancellors and share that with you.
Mr. Chairman. As we look, this is Karen, as we look forward to some number coming to us at some time, which includes the governor's process, I am wondering, and this is a question maybe for our governance committee and also for our chair, that we build in some more face time than we have. We anticipate that we're going to be moving into some more difficult discussions, and that we try to avoid the situation today that we had with the teleconference, because I agree that was very awkward and not ideal. Not even close to ideal. So I understand that we schedule far out for our meetings, and understand that we all have busy lives. But I would just ask you, John, to think about, as we get clearer on some of these questions, if we're going to have to address a community campus structure or these other very big decisions, we really need to take the time to do this in a way that we don't put ourselves as board members in uncomfortable situations. It's going to be uncomfortable enough, but we get the time we need to process it.
The meeting format, I can deal with. The time, I may not be able to.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Regent Parker again. Yes, that would be wonderful, President Johnson, if you would share your notes from the meeting.
You bet. And to Regent Perdue's comment, I completely agree. It is very likely there are a lot of very, very difficult issues down the road. And so having that time together would be, I think, ideal. I would note that there will never be enough time to satisfy everyone's legitimate and appreciated curiosity and commitment. Because, of course, the budget we're going to get goes into effect on July 1st of 2020, or 2019, excuse me. So, and it's not at all unlikely or impossible that we'll be in extra sessions, and we will not be done by our June meeting. But in any case, the more time we spend together, the better, I think, so that when we do get to the end and we do get a number, we will be further up the learning curve than otherwise. So thank you. I would note here, all we know now is on the House side. On the Senate side, we've had several meetings with our subcommittee. It's a very strong subcommittee. Let's see, Hoffman and Stevens and von Imhoff and Kawasaki. So a very good subcommittee. And actually on the House side, we had a very good subcommittee as well. So they are waiting for the House budget to come over to the Senate, and then they will relatively quickly close out on the Senate side. So we expect that to happen perhaps Friday, maybe Monday, Tuesday of next week. Now, the third leg on the stool here is obviously the executive, and we are doing our best to get a meeting with the governor, hopefully later this week. We have had ongoing meetings with the OMB director, and those have not been substantial in terms of numbers. We're hoping that those meetings, which will continue here over the next week, will become more firm. But there's a long way to go in this sausage-making process. And so again, lots of uncertainty. Moving forward to some of the structural options. One is the status quo, just leaving it as it is, and then focusing our universities on their core strengths. So this will be, if we are cut, then contracting in to core strengths and missions of each of our 3 accredited universities and leaving the community campuses where they are. Now, that is not to say that we wouldn't seek to do some of the things that the community campus directors and the chancellors have suggested in terms of increased collaboration and course sharing across the community campuses. But it leaves the structure alone. This has the real upside of not bumping into really bumping into the accreditation issues. The next, I would refer to it more as a lead campus model. This would maintain 3 separately accredited universities, but move our community campuses into only 1 university as opposed to 3. The idea here being to focus each of the 3 accredited institutions on a more defined, tighter mission here. So you would have UAF, for example, focused on its STEM and Indigenous programs and graduate education research, also, of course, having a strong undergraduate program, but it would not, under this scenario, have community campuses as part of it. And similarly, UAA, which would be focused on its metropolitan, comprehensive, urban mission, our health campus leading in the state, strong in business, et cetera. But again, it would not have that community campus, community college mission as part of it. That would be led by UAS. And again, this is just an option for discussion and consideration. The final option here is one that has the greatest risk in terms of transition, in terms of the time required, in terms of complexity, and in terms of accreditation, and that is a single accredited university, including the community campuses. Why don't I leave it there for a moment and get the board's questions or comments. This will not be the last time, obviously, these are discussed, but I'd like this opportunity to hear from you, and then we'll talk about some next steps.
Are there questions or comments on the structural options?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
This is Mary. Jim, I think your team, as you always do, you've done such an outstanding job in the face of. Are we in the executive session? Because I missed that.
No.
We will be in a minute.
We're not in the executive session?
No.
We are?
We are not.
Okay. Oh, I'm glad I asked. I'm sorry. I dialed in and I got Anyway, so I won't talk. I won't be effusive. I think that the university, I've always said that, is that as a result of not only your leadership, but the leadership of our former chairs and our present chair, is in a place that we can provide extremely needed leadership for the state. And these are so well articulated. I love the way they're articulated because no one wants to go anywhere. But when we're talking about these things, we need to educate and illuminate and understand that we will be perhaps a wonderful university and an excellent university, but we will not be the same university. And, I applaud all the work, and in light of everything else that's going on, when I was looking through the slides last night, I was just going, how did you do all of this? And thank you to you and your team, and the chancellors and their teams. And it's a very important, we know through our disciplined process how we've gotten through other budget cuts. And this is just a continuum of that. And I think that's what leads. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you, Regent Hughes. I would note that there are lots and lots of devils in the details.
There are lots of nettles. Sometimes I hike where there are nettles, and I understand nettles.
Yeah. Okay. Well, nettles and devils. So, yeah. And, I do have a super team, the chancellors, the team here at the statewide office. But I think what this may understate a bit is the level of difficulty, complexity, and the fact that really all three of these, depending upon the budget we get, will require significant reductions. And just the kind of conversation we began having this afternoon will be the kind of conversation we're put into by these proposed budget reductions. And, I too seek consensus and seek collaboration in decision making. It is when money is flowing, it's something that's reasonable to expect. It becomes very, very difficult to expect that kind of altruistic behavior when budgets are being cut. And so I think it's not unreasonable that we have had perhaps a little bit more competition that is to be expected of our universities when they are seeking resources. And they're not just seeking them for mere turf reasons or selfishness. They're seeking them because they need them in order to achieve their missions. Sausage-making processes are not pretty sometimes, especially when you're in the room. And I think we all have to prepare ourselves for some really difficult choices coming forward without perfect information. That's the reality of the situation that we are in, and I'm sure will be in over the coming months.
Thank you, Mr. President. And
so in terms of,
some of us, I'm sorry.
Go
Mr.
ahead,
Chair,
please.
may I say something? Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
Some of us are older than others of us, and we have seen lots and lots with respect to the university, and somehow and in some way, as Regent Banyan said, some things, you have to be optimistic with respect to your decision making, because sometimes it turns out not as you would expect, but it might be something even greater than you expect. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Regent Hughes. Appreciate your optimism and the positive approach. It's critical for us. Very little great in the world has ever happened through a negative approach. I'm, difficult though it is, really trying as hard as possible to advocate a very positive vision for the state. Our advocacy and our campaign has that positive tone, hence the brand UA Strong. And I think that's what we've just got to do going forward, even though difficult choices likely will be visited upon us. That's what Alaskans want to see, I think. I don't think they're supportive of a dystopia. So next steps, we're going to continue pushing hard with that positive image and positive commitment to our state. We'll be analyzing options for that multi-year compact. It is something that the OMB director has done in previous cases in other states. So we have studied those other cases, particularly California, where she's done that on a couple of occasions. And essentially the idea is some sort of commitment, and to borrow a term from one of my predecessors, a pinky pledge, because it's not something that can be legally binding, but it's a sort of an agreement. Maybe it's a small a agreement, but it's an agreement between or among the legislature, the executive, and the university as to what our UGF budget would be, perhaps even capital, maybe some policy supports, for example, dual enrollment, continuation of WWAMI. Those are examples of some policy, land grant, policy areas that we need their support for. And then there would be commitments on our side in terms of, frankly, our goals and measures are a very good start. What are we committed to in terms of what we're going to deliver on behalf of the state? Again, this isn't something that has happened here for us in the past, so there's a little bit of wariness, but there are some folks very interested in this, and I think I do try to build common ground, and since the administration does have a person in an influential position who has some experience doing this, it may be an opportunity for us. And again, as I indicated early in my remarks, then our effort goes to philanthropy, it goes to enrollment, and really getting out there and sending a very positive message to Alaskans about their university, as opposed to one more newspaper story about a cut. More detail on that in executive session. And then I am working with the chancellors on refined missions and position and program adjustments that we are considering to accommodate these potential reductions. And in addition to that, continuing analysis of those structural options in light of those potential cuts. And we would be preparing detail for discussion with this board on May 9th, the next time you're scheduled to meet. So that's the end of the public presentation, Mr. Chair. And if there aren't any questions or additional comments from the board, I would ask that we move into executive session.
Okay. Well, first, are there any questions or comments that Regents want to make at this point? Hearing none, then I'd look for a motion to move into executive session. Wendy, would you read the actual motion?
The Board of Regents goes into executive session to discuss matters, the immediate knowledge of which clearly would have an adverse effect on the finances of the university related to financial strategy, and matters that by law or Regents policy are required to be confidential related to legal advice on personnel matters and university finances. This motion is effective April 8, 2019.
So do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Can you call the roll?
Regent Tuber?
Yes.
Regent Beretta?
Yes.
Regent Anderson?
Yes.
Regent Parker?